The truth about scholarships for college volleyball. This is a look at how scholarships work at the NCAA and NAIA divisions. I'll help you make sure we understand underlying terms and tell you percentages and what they actually mean for your athlete. So, if you're ready to get all of the volleyball info, let's go. So before we get started, we need to understand that these are limits set by the governing associations. Limits, not set amounts. Schools have to be fully funded to give the full amount of allowed scholarships. Not all schools are fully funded. They become fully funded by built-in athletic fees built into the tuition, money made from fan attendance to games, camps and clinics that are hosted by the schools, as well as donations from fundraisers and donors. There are also roster spots open at every division beyond what the scholarships will cover. These are called walk-on spots. Walk-ons in the world of volleyball are still typically recruited, although there are a few schools that do hold an open tryout. Walk-ons are still able to earn a playing spot, still get the gear, still travel with the team. They are still just as much part of the team as a scholarship athlete. They just do not have the scholarship money attached for that year. If you didn't catch that specific wording, then you miss what so many people miss for that year. Scholarships can be on a one-year contract. National letters of intent are only signed once. Then the NCAA requires the institutions to notify the athletes of renewal every year after that. So if a D1 college coach gives you a 2-2 offer, that means they are verbally committing for 4 years, but the NIL signed will only cover the first year contract. Because scholarships are on one-year contractual basis, there is a chance a walk-on will be able to earn scholarship money later on. You also have to understand the limited number of spots there are for college volleyball players. This is a chart of info gathered by the NCAA based off of high school athlete survey data in 2018 to 2019. First off, how many athletes do you know that do not play high school ball but play club and are hoping for a college spot? I know a lot. Second, think of how many players you saw at tourneys in 2019 compared to how many you saw this past year or even saw at tryouts. The numbers have definitely increased. There is an estimated 454,000 female players now and an estimated 66,000 male players now. While the number of male programs have steadily increased, we cannot say the same for female programs. We also have to understand that this chart is just showing the percentage of athletes that will go on to play in the NCAA division. There are other divisions, yes, but NCAA has the largest number of programs from their 3 collective divisions. They have more programs than any other association, so this data will give you a pretty good picture of just how hard it is to get recruited to play college volleyball. So let's look at this data. For men's volleyball, an estimated 3.7% of high school athletes will have the opportunity to go on and play college volleyball. There are more men's programs now in many other divisions, but there are also more men's players. So this is not a high percentage. The only men's sport lower than men's volleyball is men's wrestling. Now let's look at women's volleyball. Women's volleyball comes in at 3.9 and has the lowest percentage of high school to college athlete conversion. Also remember, I noted that there are more players now and not many more, if anything, actually less women's programs. To put that into another perspective with these numbers, if you had 1,000 men and 1,000 women players, 37 men and 39 women would be the only ones that were able to continue playing at that next level. That's why I do what I do. It is tough. As we talk about scholarship amounts, I will talk more about the divisions, specific data from this chart as well. Also note that it is illegal for athletes to be awarded scholarships that exceed the cost of attendance. So, if you ever hear somebody's mama bragging that their baby got a 4-year full ride offer that was way more than what they'll need, so they'll get extra money, they're either lying or their baby's about to lose their eligibility. Flip side of that, however, the institution itself is allowed to use the same cost of attendance procedures for athletes that are used for the general student to determine the individual cost of attendance, or COA. So athletes at the same school, on the same roster, both with full rides that cover all of their COA, may actually have different amounts of money attached to them. Another disclaimer, before we dive into division-specific info, I am not talking about how athletes can lose scholarships or what happens if a scholarship changes or if a change is made, but I will be very soon. So be sure to subscribe if you want to learn what all of that info is too. All right, NCAA Division I. For women's volleyball, teams can offer a maximum of 12 full ride scholarships. Because Division I women's volleyball is classified as a head count sport, only 12 scholarships that can cover full COA are allowed. The rest of the athletes on the team are considered walk-ons, or athletes who don't receive any athletic scholarship money to play their sport. Scholarships cannot be awarded for a period less than 1 academic year unless the volleyball player is graduating after the fall semester, and of course there are a few other exceptions. The coach also cannot make an agreement with the athlete that exceeds the student's 5-year eligibility period. 1-year grant and aids will be awarded in equal amounts for each term of the academic year. Multi-year awards can be given at D1 schools, but there are plenty of rules that allow for changes in aid amount. Again, things like this, as well as scholarships and injuries, will be covered in a different video. So, knowing that no more than 12 scholarships will be given to NCAA Division I athletes, but also knowing that most Division I schools carry more than 12 on a roster, what else do we need to know? The NCAA does not have rules for the number of players on the women's indoor roster, but each conference has their own rules. Like the SEC caps at 17. NCAA Division I does only allow 15 players in uniform for the national championship tourney, though. So what does all of this mean? Short version, at NCAA Division I schools, 12 indoor girls have scholarships, the rest are walk-ons. That can still earn playing time, travel, and compete. Some coaches are allowed 20-plus athletes, while others are allowed fewer because of their conference rules. Now, let's talk men's. Men's volleyball at the Division I level is considered an equivalency sport, meaning They have 4.5 scholarships if fully funded, but they are allowed to divide them up however they wish to, all of their counters or athletes. So, interesting thing about equivalency scholarships is actually how they are computed. So, if an athlete gets aid, they are a counter. We take the amount received by the student athlete as the numerator and the full grant and aid value of that student athlete as the denominator. Then the sum of the team's fractions cannot equal more than the limited amount specified by the NCAA. Then there are all kinds of rules on estimated book cost, in-state versus out-of-state, tons of details. That's why it's easier to think of it in terms of a set amount of full rides that can get divided up to athletes. All right, now let's talk Division I women's beach. If an institution has indoor and beach, there's a limit of 6 values or equivalencies and an annual limit of 14 counters. Confusing? Yeah. So if a school has women indoor and beach, then their beach program falls under pretty strict equivalency awards that also limit the number of counters or students that are receiving athletic aid. Remember, don't confuse counters with roster spots. If a school does not have indoor but does have beach, it's an 8-on-14 counter. So what if they play both indoor and beach? Well, then there will be a counter for indoor. Actually, if they play any two sports with one of them being volleyball, they will count as volleyball counters unless the other sport is basketball. Then they're a basketball kid. Current scholarship amounts for all sports at the Division I level create an average of 57% of athletes receiving athletic aid. I would argue that the football numbers increase this statistic a ton, but we're just going to use the information we have. So, remember our table showing that the number of athletes that will go on to play. It shows 0.7% will play men's volleyball at the Division I level, and 1.2% of women will play at the Division I level. So for our aspiring guys, that would mean out of the newly estimated 66,000 players, 462 will get a D1 spot, and only 263 would have some athletic aid. For our girls, that means out of the newly estimated 454,000 girls, 5,448 would get a D1 spot, and 3,105 would have some money. Remember, this number is all high school players, not just one recruiting class. All players. So if you take the 263 for guys and the 3,105 for girls, then divide that even further by 4 to factor in the 4 different graduating classes of high school athletes that are represented in this data, you get an estimated 66 men and 776 women that will be in your athlete's graduating class across the nation that will have some form of Division I money attached to them. That's why approaching the recruiting process with a D1 or bust mentality, when you have specific financial goals and personal needs, is limiting. Please hear me though. We do not want that to squash your athlete's goals. With the right systems and the right mindset, we can find them a spot. Moving on. NCAA Division II follows the equivalency scholarship policy for volleyball. Starting with men's this time, there are 4.5 values or equivalencies. Women's indoor has the highest volleyball D2 value with 8 equivalencies. And women's beach is at 5. But if a player plays indoor and beach, then they count as an indoor equivalency or count. D2 scholarships are only allowed to be given on a 1-year basis. Unless, of course, things like someone is graduating at the semester, then it can be given as a half year. Scholarship amounts can increase as your impact on the team increases yearly. There are also walk-ons at the D2 level, and there is no limit from the NCAA on roster spots, but most conferences have their own rules. The NCAA also only allows 17 athletes in uniform at the D2 Indoor Championship tourney. Scholarships from all of the sports at the D2 level equal about 60% of athletes that have some level of athletic aid. So, fun with math again. Remember, these are estimates based off of statistical analysis, not saying these are set in stone. So, I'm just trying to help you guys see all the info. I'll do it a little bit different in case you did not follow my last example. Of the 66,000 high school men players, there are 4 graduating classes in that data. So an estimated 16,500 in one graduating class. 116 will play at D2 level and 69 will have athletic aid. Then for the girls, 454,000 in 4 graduating classes, 113,500 in one class, 1,249 will go on to play D2, 749 will have athletic aid in a graduating class. NCAA Division III give no athletic scholarships, but don't let that drive you away. Division III scholarships are more academic focused and are not bound by the same recruiting rules as Division I and Division II. This allows the coach and the athlete to build a better relationship, guiding the athlete to other scholarship opportunities. In fact, most student athletes at Division III schools benefit from some form of financial aid, from academic scholarships to need-based and merit scholarships. There are plenty of ways to help pay for an athlete's education if they have the required grades and resume. In D3 schools, 80% of athletes receive non-athletic scholarship aid. There is no limit to roster spots, but the women's indoor tourney is limited to 17. NAIA follow the modified equivalency scholarship format for volleyball with max of 8 scholarships, meaning they are allowed to divide the money that would cover 8 full scholarships up between athletes to give athletes that participate in more than 20% of the maximum allowable number of varsity contests. So for volleyball, that is 12 games in the NAIA. You may have noticed the use of the word varsity. It is not uncommon for NAIA schools to carry a junior varsity and a varsity roster. To make things even crazier, the JV players can also get scholarships and they won't count towards the max limits. They have a limit of 18 in uniform at their tourney, but matching NCAA fashion, there is not a limit to number of athletes or teams that a school can hold. This is up to each individual institution. Now, I do not have reliable data for the percent that will go on to play NAIA, but there are less NAIA programs than there are NCAA Division II programs. So the stats will not be huge for this association either. As you can see, there is a lot of info to know about scholarships. The best part is, though, you don't actually have to know all of this. It's helpful if you have a quality understanding, but there are resources out there, like me, that can hold your hand throughout the recruiting process and help you make sure you know all of your athletes' options. It is a cutthroat recruiting world out there that is just getting harder and harder since volleyball is one of the fastest growing sports. But don't give up. Keep working, and when you need help, you know where to find me. See you next time, guys.